So you can't just decide that you're going to be a strong speaker. You need evidence points. So start with stages in your friendlies, in your networks of people that already know and love you, and do smaller speeches in those environments. So you build evidence points that you are okay and you are safe. The fear of being cancelled outweighs actually being cancelled by something like 30 to 1. So for every one person who actually gets cancelled, 30 people don't speak up because of their fear of being cancelled. So it's the fear of being cancelled that's actually stopping us from speaking. Finding your voice and speaking up, even when your legs shake, is the only way to create the future that you want.
Get ready for the next iteration of you on your path to becoming wealthy. On this show, you'll get the insider's view on wealth creation, the class none of us got taught in school, with my co-host, daughter, and beginning investor, Sophia Bosch. And now, let's get started. Welcome to Becoming Wealthy. I'm your host, Michelle Bosch. My co-host,
Sophia Bosch.
We are excited to have today on today's podcast an amazing lady that I met almost, I would say, over 5 years ago at a women's event. And since the moment we met, I think we clicked. She is a fifth generation entrepreneur. She is a speaker, very well known in Australia and here in the US. She's also a speaker trainer. She has appeared in more than 3,000 times on media, been and spoken on global stages, delivered more than 180 workshops. And I just couldn't be more excited to have here with us today, Jaqueline Nagle. How are you, Jaqueline?
I'm great, Michelle and Sophia. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming to us and tuning in all the way from Australia. I know you're coming to us from the future, bright and early in the morning for you. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Jaqueline. I know Sophia wanted to kick us off because, she is right now in the process of discovering really the power that speaking has, especially for us women, and I mean for anyone in general. But for us ladies, that ability to speak up when our legs are shaking, when we're ready to maybe dissent with, whoever is speaking, or maybe share a conviction or speak up on behalf of someone else, if we see an injustice in the world, and just how important that is. So with that, Sophia, I know you wanted to kick us off with question number one for Jaqueline.
Yeah, so what? Like you said, why is speaking your truth and speaking up so important? And what's the best way to ensure your message lands? What's the best way to make sure the other party understands you? Maybe not at least surface level, but if possible, a little deeper than surface level.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is, why is it so important to speak up? It's because I have a very firm belief that when women speak, the whole world changes, right? And so we need to be able to speak up and speak into what matters for us. And that is, I obviously train people to speak from stage, but it's also just around the kitchen table. It's in the classroom. It's in the workplace. It's wherever you are. So I believe that it's fundamental to us being able to create the future that we say that we want. And I can unpack that a little bit later. When it comes to how we make sure our messages land, the first thing I would say is there's some things that I want all the people listening to understand. There's a couple of things that we need to debunk first, if you like. And the first is that it's okay to take our time. So sometimes when we're speaking up or speaking out, on behalf of somebody else, to something that matters, something of deep conviction, we're quite emotional, right? So what we need to do first of all is slow it down, either through box breathing exercises, or we have some other activities that we teach our clients. But just take a moment, even just count to 5 before you respond to someone or speak up, or when you're trying to get to your feet and your legs are shaking. Just slow it down. Breathing exercises is actually the fastest way to slow yourself down, because when we speak, the way that we make our message land, there's a whole range of things with that. But the first thing is that we slow down and take our time, because for women particularly, there is a predisposition in all sorts of media where women can sound shrill when they're emotional. And it's what other people and audiences use to kind of discount our opinion or our perspective. So when we slow it down, we're able to speak with strength and power and grace, not with high emotion and high-pitched voices and all the things that count against our credibility in a world that's used to hearing men speak. So that's the first thing, slow it down. The second thing is mentally, even if you've only got time to mentally create bullet points in your head, just get at least 1 or 2 bullet points that you know you want to express, because it starts to structure your thinking. And then the third thing is when we're actually speaking from a stage or a platform or from wherever we have the opportunity to speak, is actually take the time to craft what you're doing. Winston Churchill has this incredible quote. He was actually known for very quick, brief speeches. And there was one where he rambled a bit, and journalists actually asked him afterwards, why did you speak for so long? And he said, because I didn't have time to prepare something shorter. So to get something clear and on point actually takes preparation. So if it's an important speech or an important conversation, take time to actually shape it and construct it. And it gives you a foundation of safety, because you know where you're going in the conversation, or you know where you're going with the speaking. But if you have to speak, and you have to speak fast in response to something, and just take a few seconds to do some very quick breathing, or to count and slow yourself down, so that when your voice does come out, you're actually able to control where you're going with it and able to speak with strength, power, and grace, because that's the most important thing, especially for young women, to be able to actually hold their ground and speak without seeming emotional and irrational. I mean, in men, it's called passionate, right? But for women, we're seen as emotional and irrational. So that's one of the things that we've got to counteract right from the start.
That is what an important distinction there, Jaqueline, that, when men use emotion, it's considered passionate. But when we do it, it actually takes away from the credibility and the message that we're trying to make. So important to, like you said, to slow it down. I know that I suffer from that malady of wanting to speak too quickly. And with that, sometimes I think it's from just being so passionate about what you're saying that, you take up speed, and it's important to slow it down, to have some pauses, to be okay with silences in the middle, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So thank you for that amazing, reminder, because I did take a workshop with you as well. I'm part of one of the 180 that she has delivered. So I know that I see this time and time again. When I have in-person events with women, we usually have a women cocktail hour. Prior to our event, it's a 3-day event. That we usually host once or twice a year for our land investing community. And many women say, Michelle, I admire your courage to go out there and speak up, because when you do and you answer questions, sometimes even inside of the Facebook community, it's written. It's written. My voice is in writing. I'm not even speaking up, but I'm speaking up in writing. She's like, the answers that you give to others, I knew those answers, but I am so scared of not being perceived as someone that is knowledgeable, even though I have done 10, 15, 20, 30 land deals. I've made $200,000, $300,000 from land investing. I still don't feel that I am adequate enough to go and help answer questions or give my opinions on public forums, of things that I know well. And part of it could be, this sense of like a little bit of feeling like an imposter, about something. Yeah. How can we overcome that and speak up, whether it be in writing, in a public forum, or speaking up in general? What would you have to say to something like that? For example, for Sophia, especially now as she is becoming, an advocate for herself, with teachers, with others, with buyers, with sellers in her land business. And she knows about the topic that she wants to speak, but she might have this, doubt about her ability to speak confidently about a specific topic.
Yeah, it's interesting, because this is one of the reasons we turned our work to being predominantly women about 18 months ago, because it's the imposter syndrome and the inner critic and the way that puts a stranglehold on our outer voice is particularly prevalent for women. So as you're building this muscle, Sophia, one of the things that's really important is to remind yourself, or to take comfort, I guess, in the knowledge that this isn't just something that you experience. This is centuries of conditioning of women to be quiet, to doubt the power of our own voice, to doubt our right to speak. And so even though you sometimes think to yourself, I'm really strong and I really know my things and I know that I have the right to speak to this, there is this universal conditioning that is actually almost genetically coded in us. So some of the things that I talk to people about all the time is, number one, is that the imposter syndrome, or their inner voice, if you ever hear it questioning, and the example that you gave, Michelle, of the woman in your land group, whenever you hear that, somewhere in this last decade or so where the imposter syndrome has almost been popularized, like it's become kind of like, this is the thing, somewhere in amongst that, we've decided that that is, our imposter syndrome holds instruction, but the imposter syndrome is actually an indicator. It's a voice telling us to pay attention. It's not telling us that we shouldn't go there. It's not giving us directions. It's actually asking us to pay attention. So imposter syndrome just tells us that this is important, that this matters, that we need to make sure that we step into this space. The imposter syndrome comes from our inner critic, which comes from our inner voice. So the inner critic is the negative voice in your head that is trying to keep you safe because of previous experience that you've either experienced or you've heard about. The inner critic is actually born from your inner voice, which is love, right? So if we welcome the imposter syndrome, see it as an indicator, not an instruction, the inner critic starts to step down, and you can wrap your voice back up in the inner voice, which is one of love. So that is one of the things. The other thing with this as well is we need evidence points. So you can't just decide that you're going to be a strong speaker. You can't just decide that you can't power pose your way into this, right? You can't just will your way into being a great speaker. So you need evidence points. So start with, for example, the woman in your Facebook group. Encourage her to just do a couple of written pieces and responses to questions. Sophia, when you're actually going out to get donations for this not-for-profit, start with smaller donations that won't matter as much. When you're speaking on stages, we have a strategy with our clients where we talk about doing the first 5 friendlies, which is find stages in your friendlies, in your networks of people that already know and love you, and do smaller speeches in those environments. So you build evidence points that you are okay and you are safe, because the only way the inner critic falls back into the love of the inner voice is knowing that you're safe. So you need to build evidence points to tell it that it's safe. You can't just instruct it. You actually have to build the evidence points. And that's, especially as you're emerging and you're making this transition soon. I saw that you're looking at colleges now, like especially as you're emerging, you're going to have to advocate a lot for yourself in that college environment. Don't go for the big one first up. Go for the small ones and build the habits and the evidence points that you're going to be safe to raise your voice.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this, Sophia, so far?
I mean, I have a presentation tomorrow.
So this is very useful, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about box breathing. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, box breathing is one of the fastest ways. There's a whole heap of strategies, but this one's really fast. And Sophia, I'll give you one you can use tomorrow as well. So box breathing is breathe in for 2, 3, 4, hold for 2, 3, 4, breathe out for 2, 3, 4, hold for 2, 3, 4. If you can get 3 or 4 of those in.
She's like, I got it.
Calm me down. Yeah. And the other one, Sophia, if you are actually getting really nervous, and this will become really prevalent as you move through college, is if there's a big presentation that you're very nervous for, understand that that is actually a physiological response. So it is an adrenaline response to a perceived threat. Now, we know that speaking is not actually a threat, but that's how our body perceives it. So the fight, flight, fear, or fawn response comes from your body flooding with adrenaline, getting ready to keep you safe. So you can't also just mantra yourself through that and positive think your way through it. So one of the things that we use, and you can do anytime, Sophia, is we actually get our clients to do wall push-ups. So they do wall push-ups until the tops of their arms fatigue, and that expels the adrenaline and calms you down.
Wow. What do you think about that? Are you ready for some push-ups tomorrow?
Yeah.
Tomorrow is not a big presentation, thank God, but
it is in front of, your peers, and it's important. It matters, I'm sure. Now, have you ever had the situation, Sophia, where you wanted to speak and for some reason you're like, oh my gosh, no, I'm going to keep quiet. What was going in your head?
Plenty of time.
So what was going in your head? What was going on?
Like I have an idea, but then I start thinking of reasons like, like where people can criticize me for what I say, and then I decide not to say it.
Yes. And it's sometimes not just the inner critic that we fear, but what others are going to say about, or, judge us. What do you have to say to that, Jaqueline?
The reason the inner critic pops up and sort of questions whether you should speak to it or should express your idea is because it's been witnessed to or has felt somebody judging before. So the inner critic comes from an external experience. So the fear of what people have to say, and Michelle, you know some of my story. Remember how I wasn't speaking when I first met you, even though I was teaching others to speak. And that was 100% based in fear of what other people will think. So there's a couple of things that we do here. We do a clarity through contrast exercise with Dr. John DeMartini, which we can give a link in the show notes for people to do. And that gets rid of that voice that tells you that you're not worthy. And then we also just get really focused on why we are doing this, and also understand that quite often the fear of what is going to happen is so much more than what actually happens. So, you can stare down your worst fear and it doesn't actually come true. And what's been really interesting, we're doing a lot of work around cancel culture at the moment, because obviously when you go to speak up, when you say the wrong thing and you get cancelled, and, it happens from individuals right through to major brands. We're doing a lot of work on that. And what's really interesting is there's some research starting to emerge in this space from, I think, Princeton, which is the fear of being cancelled outweighs actually being cancelled by something like 30 to 1. So for every one person who actually gets cancelled, 30 people don't speak up because of their fear of being cancelled. So it's the fear of being cancelled that's actually stopping us from speaking. Now, would I recommend being cancelled? No, I've been cancelled once and I would not recommend it to anyone. But it's about getting really clear on why it matters. And for women and young women, finding your voice and speaking up, even when your legs shake, is the only way to create the future that you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like, though, like there's some situations where it's like last year, I was new to the school, so it was my freshman year of high school. I was like 9th grade, new school. And I like sitting in those classes, like you could see like from my teacher comments from like the beginning of the year to like the end of the year. At the beginning, it's like, oh, Sophia needs to speak up more. I realize she's new. She's maybe getting comfortable, but she needs to speak. And then by the end of the year, you can see that like, oh, she participates fully in class, whatever. Like, but I feel like some of the like,
there's still this hesitation of like, what are my peers going to think about? And sometimes it's a matter,
because you want to make the right first impression, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes for me, it's a matter of like, I know that if I'm being authentic to what I believe and, and what I know is true in my experience, that it'll land, well. Yeah. And for the people that it doesn't land well, they're probably not my peeps anyways to begin with. We're not energetically in the same wavelength, that's what I have noticed. And there's going to be a natural tendency of people that, you are going to really jive with. I've met many women and many people, and not everyone, there's this reciprocity of like, connection. But it is important that you do speak up and that you do, do it with conviction and being authentic and true to yourself. Are there any studies, Jaqueline, as to what it does to your nervous system to keep on repressing, the speaking up, and what it does to you physically? I mean, do you know?
Of specific studies for speaking up, because it really is something that is coming up for women more than men.
Yeah.
And I think it's an emerging space. But there's a couple of things that you touched on there, Sophia. Number one is it's a little bit more difficult. Like once you're into adult and later years in life and even in college, you can kind of create your own environment. When you're moving to a school environment, it's kind of constrained and you don't have a choice but to be in there. One of the things I would say is the being quiet at the start was simply finding your bearings, simply knowing where you were safe, simply knowing that where were the pockets where you could speak up. Now, obviously, as you grew into that space, that worked much better. But it's actually about making sure that that is literally just the start of walking to any new space. So it's literally like, I'm going to allow myself an amount of time to scan this new environment, and then I'm going to start to show up where I can find the bits of safety to do so. And so it's about scanning the environment. The other thing is that when we do repress our voice, I think this is especially for women of our generation, Michelle, this is where it's showing up in unhappiness, in ill health, in frustration, in sudden changes of everything, in burning things to the ground. So repressing our voice, all it does is it allows the bad to take over, right? And so our voice can actually be used in anger. It can be used with strength, power, and grace. It can be used in so many different ways. But repressing our voice keeps us invisible. It actually shows up in anger. It shows up in disease. It shows up in complete dissatisfaction. It shows up in a sense of longing that you can never quite quell. So it leads to a very disturbed level of living, in my view. Yeah. It also, when we don't speak up, and even, I did a post just recently about what happens when we don't celebrate, because as women and high achieving women, we quite often don't stop to celebrate what we do and how we do it. And when we don't stop to celebrate, what happens is we stay invisible. So, for example, people never learn that what your mother does. If your mother had not spoken up about what she and your father have created, it wouldn't have the ripple effect that it's having. If we don't celebrate and stand in the truth and speak into what it is that we do and we love and we're proud of, then we stay invisible, right? And there's a big cost to that. There's economic costs, there's financial costs, there's career costs, there's business costs, and there's a deep personal cost to actually staying invisible. Invisibility is the worst thing that you can throw on somebody. And that's why cancellation is so powerful, because you become invisible to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a time when anyone can hide behind a computer, that cancel culture has become so much more prevalent, and not just prevalent, but incredibly almost vile,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It is absolutely vile. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is, number one, I believe women need to know how to speak to be able to create their future. And they need to be able to create financial independence and all those sorts of things. But the other thing is, I'm very passionate about, especially women, speaking with strength, power, and grace, and not being the rebel fighting against the machine, and not being the angry feminist, but to actually speak in a way that you command attention and it becomes irrefutable. And that's the way that we stand out in a world that's gone a little bit crazy with rage and anger and cancellation and justification and self-determined justice, right? And so we can't stand out and we can't make a difference and we can't shift it if we join that noise. But if we go counterculture and we learn how to speak with strength, power, and grace into what we know to be true about the world, then that's almost inarguable, and people actually start to step away from you, not in a bad way, but the ones that want to come after you know that they can't do so.
Yeah, absolutely. They can't touch you, and your people will find you. There's always, remember what I say, we're all unique, we're all a little weird, and so it's about shining that weirdness brightly so the other weirdos like us can find us. Pretty much.
It's 100% that.
Yeah. You talked about, right now the financial cost and economic cost of not speaking up. I know that when you train, others to speak, it's not just to speak, but sometimes to become even professional speakers, and actually get paid to speak. That is a way of becoming wealthy, Sophia, that, I was very excited to explore here, with Jaqueline today, because we talk a lot about real estate. And yeah, there is speaking involved when you talk to sellers and buyers, right? But there's also the possibility to go out there and speak professionally, and about a topic that is, dear to you and that you're passionate about, and being, paid well. I mean, I'm assuming that's the main fuel as a fifth generation entrepreneur for you of how you've built your wealth, Jaqueline.
There's actually 3 layers to it. So there's absolutely, we start with a professional speaker. So the professional speaker who is able to command a stage. And I talk about moving audiences from where they are now to where you want them to be, to where they never expected to be. That actually accelerates you into highly paid speakers. Now, there are, especially in the American market, there are some speakers who earn millions of dollars just in speaking fees. One of my colleagues in Texas, she earns about $4 million a year just from big stage speaking. Right. So there's absolutely the ability to do that. It's like everything. It's like what you've created with the real estate business. You have to be really good at it. You have to go deep into it and decide you're going to master it. But you can still make a good living, even if you're not absolutely amazing. The second layer to that is probably about 60 to 70% of our clients are looking to speak to grow their business. So to become the expert of choice, to stand out for the knowledge that they bring to the world, to actually talk about the difference they make instead of the work that they do. And so a lot of our people are exploding their businesses through speaking. So they get paid sometimes, they don't get paid other times, but the combination is okay because of the amount of revenue that flows into their business as a result of speaking. Tied into that is your ability to pitch. So we do a lot of pitch coaching with startup and innovation companies. When you can pitch well, you can go after capital funding, capital venture funding, all of that sort of stuff.
She loves watching Shark Tank, and it's the pitch. It's people
so
pitching
funny.
Basically their idea, their business idea, and their product. That Jaqueline.
I'm obsessed with Shark Tank and pitching. I'm right with you, Sophia.
I've been watching it ever since I was probably 8 years old or something.
And how many people actually get it wrong? How many people still don't land it? Shark Tank's been on for so long, and you watch these finalists and it's like, really? So I really love pitching and teaching people how to pitch and teaching people how to sell, because that's the other part of speaking is pitching and selling. And then the third layer to that, which is a personal one, is I really believe, so I come from a background that wasn't successful. I come from a background where I was homeless as a teenager. I didn't finish high school. I should have been dead or in jail by the time I was 20. My ACE tests, if you or your audience know what that means, are off the scale. So the only thing that changed was actually finding my voice. And when I first found my voice, it was an angry voice, right? A very angry voice. But over time, by expressing myself, that angry voice started to shift. And the only reason I've been able to do what I do now is because I learned how to speak. So I could speak in an interview, I could speak on a stage, I could speak in a conversation. I learned how to pitch, I learned how to sell. And that changed my life from being one where I shouldn't have made it into my 20s simply because of circumstance and where I come from, to one where I was completely able to rewrite my identity in the face of the public. And so people meet me now and they're like, I wish I could speak like you. I'd love to be able to do what you do. I want to be able to, and I didn't start there, right? And the only reason that I've been able to create my own identity is because I learned how to speak. I learned how to communicate. Learned how to get people to listen to me. And that's the third layer. So there is absolutely professional speaking. There's driving business and getting opportunity. And then there's also the personal, the recreation or recuration of who you are through the words that you say.
Through the words that you say, absolutely. Which brings
because it really doesn't, I'm learning that in my marketing class too right now. It really doesn't matter if you have if you have a great idea, a product or something you're trying to sell, but the ability to get eyes on it through communication is the only way you're actually going to be profitable. You can have a product and everything set up, but no actual you need people to see it.
Yeah, you can have an amazing product, an amazing invention, an amazing service.
But if no one sees it,
you're the best kept secret in your industry, and so important.
Being able to shape story around your business and your product and your service offering gets people leaning in. You don't have to actually scream from the rooftops that you should buy my thing. People actually lean in towards you, and they're intrigued by the connection you've created. They're intrigued by what you say and the questions that you ask them. And that is how we accelerate really quickly. You know, we turned the sales team of a national corporation here, $1 billion corporation. We turned the sales team performance around. We added millions of dollars to their bottom line in 3 months. And do you know what we taught them? We taught them how to ask questions and how to answer questions through story. That's all we taught them. We didn't actually teach them. They had a strong sales process, but we taught them how to actually engage through story and through asking questions. And that, you know, literally even in $1 billion established company, within 90 days added millions and millions of dollars to their bottom line.
Yeah, storytelling. I mean, how I don't think of an exactly it captivates. I don't think of anything more that can captivate, especially, you know, personal stories. And when you're talking about a personal story, you're tapping into something that you've embodied because you've lived it. So,
and even Sophia, your mother said earlier, you're doing a not-for-profit. Like, talk about the story of origin for the not-for-profit and how it collides with your personal reason for doing this, with your personal North Star story. Yeah, and get that like into like a 60 to 90 second soundbite and get people saying, so tell me more, right? To get a question like, tell me more, or how do you do that? Or have you ever, people have to trust you to ask a question, because when they ask you a question, they're inviting you inside their world. So if you can get little micro stories that you can weave into these conversations and these sales pitches and these requests, then people actually lean in. And once they lean in, they're actually showing you that they trust you. And then you can take them where you need to take them, or you can find out very quickly if they're interested in supporting you or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And that's going to come, you know, practical come January 11th when the actual campaign, you know, for the Lymphoma and Leukemia Society foundation that she's supporting with another 2 other friends. You know, they're like a team together, and you know they have a goal of raising $150,000 for people with cancers, and she resonates that because on Jack's side of the family, you know, we've lost people to this terrible disease, and so you will be able to basically bring about stories, you know, that can relate, you know, directly to the experiences that, you know, we've had in our family, and that's something that people can connect with and connect to, and that's the beginning, and you're doing it for the benefit, you know, of you know, hundreds of children out there that are going to benefit from this, and so this is on behalf of someone, you know, and in the future, it'll probably be on behalf of your own business idea. Did you know, Sophia, that
this is
that the smallest percentage out there of venture capital is going to women? And number one, I think, is because we have not been equipped to know how to present properly and how to pitch properly an idea or a product, or, you know, whatever it might be. And it starts with us learning how to do that properly, you know, and getting training from someone like Jaqueline.
Yeah, one of the things that is really coming out in the research is one of the things so remember, I keep talking about not being as emotional and being able to speak strength, power, and grace and have command of your story and your product and your business. Is one of the things that's coming up is most women will start their business as a startup for a very deeply emotional reason, right? Mm-hmm. So even if it's simply to set up a financial future, it's a deeply felt emotional reason. Most men will start a business because it's logical and makes sense and they can see the opportunity. Yeah. So when we get to a stage where we're actually pursuing venture capital or startup funding or seed funding, we actually don't adapt our stories to being with strength, power, and grace and showing the logic and the business. We're still telling the story as if we're in our emotional startup phase. And that is actually one of the things, it's definitely not the only thing, but it's one of the major contributors at the moment to women not getting more access to the venture capital, because they're still in the mode of telling the emotional why story instead of threading that emotional why story into a powerful story that gets attention.
Yeah.
And that is the next bit that women need to understand. Yes, the venture capital markets are very skewed towards men, especially, you know, most women who get seed or startup funding are actually getting it from friends and credit cards, right? Rather than venture capital. The venture capital for women usually comes in once they're established and they're at round A, round B. So when it comes to actually getting access to more of what's available, even while we wait for the structures to catch up, We actually need to understand how to shift from that emotional why into an emotive driven scenario, which is a powerful story said with strength, power, and grace. And that's one of the things that is really important to start changing the game, because even the systems don't change if we're still showing up just with our emotional why this matters. We're not giving people a reason to invest.
Yeah.
It's like
the credibility is not
deals,
there.
you have criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you look at a property deal, there are criteria.
Yeah.
Venture capitalists and angel investors also have criteria. It's our responsibility, if we're going to shift the game, to understand the rules of that game first, so that then we can break the rules by being in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Now, I know we are probably soon getting ready here to wrap up, but I wanted to ask you the question, how you're speaking and you have a moment of either hesitation or a setback. How do you deal with setbacks in either speaking or in your life in general? You know, what's basically going up here upstairs in order to get you to move forward in faith again?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. That's so broad. I'll give you a really quick example that's a little example of something that can go wrong when you're speaking, and then move into a bigger example. So the first one is I was actually doing the closing keynote at a major conference in 2019, just before COVID. And I was walking the stage, and it was a constructed stage, and I could feel my heel. So this is a girl's problem. I could feel my heel crunch into the stage, you know, when you know that it's actually going to get stuck because it went into a crevice. And as I could feel it, I just went, oh, I can't get that back out. So I slowed right down, and I literally walked out of one, and I made sure as I was walking out of one shoe that the next shoe I put down really hard to get it stuck as well. So I walked out of the second one, and I just carried on as if I meant to take my shoes off. Right. So I delivered the rest of the speech barefoot.
You rolled with the punches.
Right? So, and the thing is that's a muscle build, right? But you have to actually just keep moving, right? The minute that you pull up to apologize, the audience will go into sympathy with you and not empathy. And sympathy means they won't actually listen to everything else you've got left to say. So no matter what happens, you just keep rolling. This is where working on the inner voice, the imposter syndrome, comes in really importantly, because you actually need to make sure that inner critic, because where we come unstuck is something goes wrong or not to plan, and the inner critic's like, you idiot, you should have known this would happen. Why did you think you could do this? Like, that starts to rise. So I've done a lot of work getting the inner critic down, right? That's the big thing. In life in general, I'm going to rephrase. I used to have a resilience strategy that I used to teach people around the world, which was when life gets really tough and big things happen, high impact events happen. I had a strategy. I close the door, go to the floor, find the thing, and climb the stairs, which was literally close out the rest of the world, bring my inner circle in tight, allow myself to break, and then find one thing to get me moving and start climbing the stairs out of wherever I was. I've actually realized that that's a trauma response, because my first initial response is no one's going to help me anyway. Right. So now what I've put in place is I have an inner circle of women who, the minute that I feel impact, I'm ringing them. They have different roles. There's 3 of them. They have different roles, and they get me through it fast. And so
what are the roles that they have?
And constructed them. So one is she just lets me cry, lets me scream, lets me rant, lets me throw things, whatever I need to do. And she just lets it all out and holds me. Mm-hmm. Right. Another one is like, okay, so what do you want to do about it? And she challenges me. She pushes me. And I go to the worst possible scenario. Like, I want to kill someone. I want to blow their stuff up. I want to burn their house to the ground. She lets me go to the worst. And then she brings it back like a realist in the Disney strategy. She brings it back to, okay, that's great. Probably can't do that. I don't have enough bail money for you. And then she brings it back to what I can actually do. And then the third person is the woman who helps me execute and supports me on the way back out.
Yeah, that's amazing. To, a team that you've assembled of people that are close to you, that are part of your inner circle, that get you to go through the different stages of this setback and get back out. Yeah.
Are you there for them too? Well, yeah.
Absolutely. So it's an agreement we've reached between all of us. And for some people, it's as simple like I work in, because speaking is actually personal development. To find your voice, you've got to deal with your demons. So I work in a space that is all about personal development, because you have to stare down a lot of demons to be able to take to the front of a room and speak. And so I have a community of people who are the same. for someone not necessarily surrounded and loved by a community like that, then what it is about is just have that person you can call in the middle of the night. You know, that person that, you know, if they see you calling at 2 a.m., they will take the call. Just someone that you can speak it out loud and speak it through, even if they don't do anything other than listen. That in its own, like Gallup, if we go back to corporate, Gallup research have proven that if you have a friend at work, you are 80% more engaged in your work, right? So it's really important that one person that you can call. They don't need to be able to do all the roles, but just someone who can listen to you when you're in your depths of either despair or celebration. Like someone who can really celebrate with you because they get what this means to you. Just that one person. That's actually all you need.
So it's important, Sophia, for you to start looking for sometimes, those people in your life. And I already, can think of names of friends that I'm like that. Oh, she could take that role and she could take that other role. I'm sure that as she was speaking, you probably have some names in mind as well. So thank you so much for sharing that strategy for sure. Yeah, I loved it. Now, what does prosperity and wealth mean to you, Jaqueline? Because she's on a journey over the next 5 years of, creating a 7-figure net worth.
Oh, yeah.
I love this. Sophia, can I just say, it melts my heart that you're doing this. Like, to actually claim that as your right and to navigate it and figure it out is formidable, and it melts my heart. I said to your mum when I first saw this coming up, this is incredible. This is what we all need. I have a son, three of my 4 children are creating wealth in spite of me, right? Yeah. To actually proactively be doing it from your age is formidable.
Thank you, because for me, and for her, we've had many conversations about this, and it's not just the ambition of the goal that I think motivates us as much as, because that's important, it's basically getting to that outcome. But most important, I think, for both of us,
comes along with
exactly, is who she needs to become in order to achieve that outcome, and we all want to become better people,
Absolutely. And sometimes when you discover that later in life, that is actually about who you become, that's confronting, because you quite often have to look into the mirror of someone that you have to recognize as someone you didn't want to become because it wasn't intentional. Yeah. Right. And so that is where I think the true beauty of this journey is for you, is that you won't be someone in her 40s or even 50s looking in the mirror and going, that is not who I'm meant to be, and realizing you weren't intentional about who you were becoming. And I think that's the true beauty. And that kind of ties into my thing about wealth and prosperity. I'm not as financially secure as I used to be, and there's reasons for that. But I know that I can get back there. So wealth and prosperity to me is having choice. Mm-hmm. Number one is fundamentally having choice. Number two is having the financial security, whatever that means for you. Number three, though, what's becoming more and more important, and it also brings in obviously reciprocity, and it's part of my faith, but it's actually that ability to give back. So, for example, this year, because the business is growing fast, it's draining a lot of cash, and you'll go through that, right? So instead of my normal donating a lot of money to different charities that are close to my heart, I know which charities I support. We ran a fundraising event because that I could put the resources into, right? So it's becoming more and more about how do I actually lift others? We've just actually launched our own podcast, which I'm putting all of my training for free out there on podcasts, right? Because I want...
What's the name of your podcast, Jaqueline?
Speaker-driven business.
Okay.
So, but it's because I want everyone to have access to building these skills, because speaking and speaking up is actually how you create and make a difference, whether it's for yourself or on behalf of others, advocating for others. And so for me, wealth and prosperity has become absolutely about accumulation of safety nets and financial assets and things like that. But also, where is my ability to give back? Where is and give back is money. It's also time, but it's also resources. Yeah. We need, and that's prosperity and wealth, because you actually have got the fundamentals covered, And you now have the ability to take a look around at what matters to you and where you can most make a difference. And that to me is prosperity, because to me, wealthy is individual and prosperity is community.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Yes. Thank you for that distinction from your end. Well, with that, Jaqueline, I just wanted to thank you for being with us today, and for those of you that are listening or watching, definitely follow Jaqueline. Where can people find out more about you, your speaker training, and all the amazing things that happen in your world?
Yeah, so anygiventuesday.com.au is our hub. And then we have a lot of stuff that happens on Instagram, which is anygiventuesday_.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, to our listeners and to our viewers for spending time with us on this journey. Sophia, you want to ask for a review?
Oh, yeah. Comment down below all your thoughts on the video and make sure to give us a 5-star rating.
Yeah, absolutely. It allows us to basically reach more women, reach more teenage girls, because you're hearing here from 2 generations of women,
and share
coming
with
together.
Someone who you think needs to hear this.
Yeah, absolutely. Who absolutely needs to hear all things about using our voice and the worlds that come and into existence as a result of us speaking up. Because for me, on a more spiritual level, if I wanted, to just end this, it's like speaking for me has been the ability to really manifest, actual real 3D worlds out of thin air from just speaking, and I think there's something very, very special there, very spiritual there when it comes to our voices and our truths and being able to make, visions and dreams a reality, for sure.